and I decided to just completely leave that city behind and vow to really change what I'd become. I'd become someone I didn't want it to be.
Yeah.
So I just up and left this city I'd spent 7 years in. Decided to quit alcohol there and then. And moved back to the Lake District and turn this chapter to try and change things around.
And so did you kind of, was it family, or did you kind of naturally, just being in Carlisle, just kind of think, oh, well, the hills are just there? Or what was that driver to kind of going from, like you say, that kind of poor health that you were in at the time to then setting up the first Fell?
I think initially, I mean, it was out of love for this ex-partner, I guess, at first. I really wanted to try and win her back on that extent, and I vowed to remove alcohol from my life. And I had some really close friends that came together. I was very open with my struggles from that moment, just on my personal sort of Facebook and whatnot. Said exactly why I'd come back from York, why I'd come back to Cumbria. And the outpouring of support I got was really overwhelming at the time, really. People turned up on my doorstep. And a close friend of mine, Ryan, actually appeared that week and said, I'm going to take you for a walk.
Okay. And
I didn't really know what to expect at the first. I think I didn't really have any equipment or clothes to hand, so I just put on what I had. It was like an old jumper, and I think I had some Lonsdale trainers on at the time. I was off to go, and he went, we're going up Fell Foodie, which meant absolutely nothing to me at the time. I just presumed it was maybe the name of a craft beer or something, really. And yeah, so it sort of began there. So he drove me into the lakes. I didn't have a pair of boots to me at all, so he stopped up on the way to a local store that way and picked up a pair of boots for me and bought them. And I was completely penniless at the time, and obviously I spent all the money I had on drink and paying my previous debts from moving out of York.
Yeah.
And he bought these pair of boots for me and took me off to the start of walking up Fell Foodie, yeah.
So almost like he knew he was investing in the right thing for you.
It was a real show of faith, really, and a show of friendship, I guess. And in what was such a huge moment of change in my life, it was a big show of endorsement. But I was so unfit at the time, of course, and I was going under the withdrawal of alcohol. I stopped smoking. Again, I was still very heavy, overweight. So heading up these fells initially, it felt like almost my Everest, I guess, sort of walking up and struggling up. But I remember it was such a glorious day, heading up Fell Foodie in that time. And
so despite kind of how tired you were feeling, you were still able to appreciate the fact that it was a pretty special landscape, yeah. Yeah,
and I think just the determination of it all as well. I mean, I was ready to leave that behind, and I really wanted to become this new person and remove that sort of stranger from my life. But slowly, sort of one after another, we finally reached the summit of Fell Foodie, and I remember just looking across down to Striding Edge, and it really just sort of clicked something in me, and it was a bit like a new passion had been ignited, and almost a new addiction was being formed, and that really just snowballed from there and carried on to sort of trying to do more and more fells in the lakes and enjoying this love of hiking.
So that kind of addiction that you were talking about then, kind of finding that the mountains was something that was really starting to appeal to you and you wanted to do more and more, I think that's something that people watching this can probably really identify with, that kind of sense of what's next. So at what point did you kind of feel like you were kind of a competent fell walker, that you had you were holding your own in that environment?
I guess I just sort of went step by step. I mean, I didn't really. I suppose I was exposed to some quite large ones straight away. I mean, my first three were sort of Blencathra, Helvellyn, and Scarfa Pike, and then
go big.
Snowdon was straight afterwards. So it was kind of straight into the deep end, really. So I remember we went to do Snowdon down in Snowdonia, and we did via Creep Goch and stuff. I remember seeing the sign there saying "Experienced walkers only," and looking at each other, thinking, "Are we experienced walkers? What denotes that?"
I'll go if you go.
But yeah, so we did it, and it was fantastic. It's still one of my favourite sort of routes now. But it's it was one of those where I guess the challenge was already quite great in my personal life. That heading up these mountains just felt a bit like a physical manifestation of that. I guess the upward journey and the challenge of getting to that summit and reaching, I guess, that equilibrium, which was for my mindset as well.
So at what point then did you kind of had this love of cooking that you had anyway, kind of fostered all the way from childhood, and then when did you kind of start to bring the two together? Was it kind of camping trips where you're pretty underwhelmed by what was on offer?
Well, it was mainly the walking at first and things really, and the fitness journey, I guess, of trying to just leave that previous life behind. So again, I'd even got into running at one stage when I couldn't even run a bath before, and we gradually went on that way and started walking up these fells much quicker, and then the boots got swapped for trail trainers and we started running up these fells, and then within around 11 months of that turnaround from June 2016, 11 months later we're at the start of a marathon line, so we're off to run a marathon. It was just completely flip reversal of where I'd come from. And from that moment is when I sort of started more the social media side and sort of dubbed myself as this Fell Foodie. And it was all very anonymous at first, though. It was very
I was
much
going to say, did you ever have this vision that it was going to become what it's become?
Not at all, no, and even still now, it's great to have these opportunities to be able to share the story further, and I think that's really an endearing part, and I really appreciate being able to share it to help others really that may be still struggling with the likes of alcoholism, depression, mental health, and obesity and things. But it was one of those that was all anonymous at first and was very much just me showcasing the walks I was doing and meals I was cooking at home, I guess, that then turned into more extravagant packed lunches that I'd take into the fells.
Okay.
So I'd often had a lot of comments from people about what I was bringing up there, and one day someone asked about maybe grabbing a stove and cooking it on the mountaintop itself. So I went and bought a stove, and then people really started to sort of take a bit more interest then and sort of started cooking and started to reveal more.
I mean, a hill walk's good, but if someone's going to cater for you on the summit, then I think you'd get buy-in from quite a lot of folk.